VP of International Sales at Sphero. Sphero make app-connected robots that give kids an introduction to coding and programming. And my role at Sphero is to manage all of the business outside of the US and Canada, which is managed by the US office. So that goes as far as Australia and as close as the UK, where CMS is our distributor.
Awesome. The reason why we wanted to get Warren and Luke here today on the podcast is with CES coming up in January, which hopefully is back on now. We wanted to sort of maybe explore the subject about what brands, if they're expanding from UK to Europe or further afield to Europe, what they should sort of look for from distribution, sales, retailers in Europe to be successful. Moving over to Warren. So in terms of your experience, what do you think the top priorities are for a brand when they're coming to Europe or from UK to Europe?
Sure. So I think the first thing is just as a little bit of context. Unfortunately, a vast majority of brands don't succeed when they come across here. I mean, in my experience, probably 90% fail. And the harsh reality is that it's an incredibly tough journey. I mean, to be a successful brand, and I'm sure Luke will agree, you need to get probably 50 ingredients right, and you could probably afford to miss out on one or two ingredients as long as they're not a key ingredient. But any more than that, and there's a great chance that you probably wouldn't succeed. So I think that the first and biggest bit of advice I would give any brand that we're looking to step into the market would be to do your research and to work with people who understand the market, people that have got past experience of being involved with scaling brands, because there's a great chance that they'll understand the blueprints, they'll know where the pitfalls are. I think other tips would be, it's important that you've got an appropriate level of funding. I've lost count of the amount of times where I've chatted to brands in the past and to step in with no budget, unless you're stepping into a category which is already well established, televisions, and you just want to win on price, you're going to have to invest, and it's going to be investments both in your channel and also in your demand creation as well.
What's that funding used for exactly when you say channel creation?
Partnerships with retailers. There are some elements of listings or to improve your location within a retailer or on their website. You might pay for a more prominent position. And that normally results in an increased level of sell-through as well, because your products are located in the right areas.
Yeah, sure. And one of the things that we found from a comms point of view is we see brands coming into Europe from, say, the US or Asia, but actually they start the comms campaign, but they haven't actually got things like distribution or sales channel in place. So they spend a lot of budget on advertising or marketing, what kind of services we provide. But actually it's too early, and the products then get listed 6 months later or even a year later sometimes.
I think from past experience, and I've been helping brands develop in Europe for the past probably 13 or 14 years. It's really important to be patient. It's important to be strategic. We would always advocate a narrow and deep approach, because while Europe's a huge continent with lots of countries, the reality is the vast majority of your revenue will be delivered from a relatively small number of countries. And then within those countries, it's important to have a clear plan to understand who your end customer is first, and which retailers that you want to work with to service those customers. Doing a great job with a small number of the right partners would always be my recommendation versus selling to anyone and everyone.
Sure. So that's an interesting perspective from the brand's point of view and the sales channel point of view. But from distribution, do you agree with those points, or what's the sort of
I think I do agree with those points. I think really, not trying to bite off more than you can chew. I think that's really important. And focusing on a small number of territories and a small number of customers is better, because my experience, and Warren's right, 90% of, I guess it's the same as with businesses, 90% of businesses fail in first, whatever the stat is, 6 months. With brands coming in, it's the same, and mostly it's because they just don't have everything in place, or they will assume that coming into Europe is the same as doing the US, which is completely different, and just have a little bit of a sort of lack of knowledge about what it takes to really drive a brand and a business forward. I think we've seen, certainly in the last maybe couple of years, a lot of businesses which will be kind of set up by engineers, ultimately real product experts, and like they know everything in terms of the ins and outs of how the product works, but nothing about communication, sales and marketing, channel, distribution, how to get something to market. So I think having all of those ducks lined up and understanding what is truly required before you step in. Like you said, have the comms plan sorted but no stock. You've got to have everything lined up together, and if you don't have that, delay it. Don't jump too early. Wait. Unfortunately, the temptation is to jump, but I think if there's a bit more patience, those brands have more chance of success.
Yeah, sure. So over the last 2 years, obviously the retail landscape has changed, and brands, when they come to Europe, there's a different channel these days in terms of getting to the customer. You can go direct now, going through things like Amazon. You can kind of still use distributors. But question to you, Luke, what is the sort of optimal type of client you're looking for in terms of that will work best with a distributor, or best to go their own way and go direct?
Yeah, I mean, I think you obviously wouldn't expect me to recommend that anybody goes direct, but actually the true situation is always one. The true situation is that you actually need some help. So if you're a young brand, you need some help. That might not always be a distributor, but you can't do it all on your own. And I think a realisation and an understanding at the outset that that's the position is important, because there is a temptation to we come up with this great product, we can do it all ourselves, we can get it out there, we can manage all the Amazon piece brilliantly and all that channel stuff, we can get in front of the customers because the product's so good, but they don't think about the communication plan, they don't think about returns, they don't think about logistics, and so it might not be that the vendor needs distribution necessarily, but they need something because they won't have everything managed and covered. So they need some support somewhere along the line.
So do you think a distributor potentially should be a bit more of an established brand that has a lot of infrastructure in place to deal with all the things that you're talking about, like returns and customer service?
Yeah, I mean, I think you get to a certain size as a vendor, and I think it is more likely that a direct model works. But I think with a smaller company where you're going to be more limited on resource and expertise, you need that support to help you drive your business forward. And we know from experience, the big brands eventually will look to go direct. There'll be pressure to manage costs, there'll be pressure from their customers, the retailers, to look at direct models. So that often is how the sort of evolutionary process works. As you get bigger, you're more likely to be direct. But there's very few businesses who are big enough now. And actually, we have a very broad range of customers from vendors from small sort of startups through to big multinational brands. So I think it's a challenge to just be able to manage all of the things that need to happen in order for you to get your product to market and sell it.
Yeah, just to add to that, Pietro, because I'm a huge advocate of distribution. I've worked with several scale-up brands, and this question always comes up: should we go direct? Should we go via a distributor? And the harsh reality is that there's a lot of work involved with getting products into retailers, and I think the vast majority of the retailers would probably say that they prefer buying from a local distributor anyway. I mean, from a brand's perspective, trying to manage 20 credit lines in a country and chase debts in and get credit insurance and get next day deliveries going when your logistics is outside of the UK, all of these things are critical. Plus, of course, distribution helps with local funding for a lot of brands as well. So for almost every scale-up brand that I've seen and worked with, distribution provides a tremendous amount of infrastructure that they would otherwise somehow need to build themselves, which would increase their fixed costs, whereas this is a variable model, so it makes tons of sense.
Yeah. So is there any truth at the moment in, brands are selling much more online at the moment, which I assume is the case, but does that make it easier for brands and distributors to sell now, so they're not going through as much issue with bricks and mortar stores, or is it the same, or what's the?
I think it's different. I mean, I think there's complexities. If you're doing all that online business, you've got the direct dispatch side and having to deal with end users, and you need to be able to sell your product in a different way. The whole content side online is very different to doing POS and display units in stores. So I don't necessarily think it's easier or more difficult. I think it's just different. And we've clearly seen a big change to the mix, but in store business.
Is it easier for brands to get online now in terms of with retailers? Because I know before it was quite hard to get brands into bricks and mortar retailers because there was so much physical space. But is it easier for them to get online now, with some of these retailers?
I think so. From what I've experienced, I think it's always been a little easier to get onto websites for retailers. It's been more difficult to get into stores. You often find that the range of products is greater online versus in store. I think ultimately you need both. Our shops have just opened back up, and retail will play an important part going forwards. But being an outstanding brand online, coming back to some of those ingredients that I mentioned earlier, creating world-class online assets is critical, and then ensuring that they flow through your distributor into your channel partners, so every website that you go on looks great and has an undiluted message about your brand with great photography, great videos. So there's a key component there, just in making sure that the right assets are created.
Cool. And then just touching very quickly on the dreaded Brexit word, does that affect entering Europe generally for a brand coming from US and Asia, or is it only UK?
I think it's difficult with Brexit. It's such a strongly felt topic, and you have to be careful around how you sort of link Brexit into the challenges that we're facing at the moment. I think for sure it's played a role, but there is some crossover between the pandemic and Brexit in terms of the challenges. So, for example, the freight costs, which we're experiencing, they're incredibly high, and moving a container from China is now 6 or 7 times more expensive than it was pre-pandemic and pre-Brexit. And there's duty complications in terms of moving stock around and customs issues. And so I think it's fair to say that there are definitely challenges that we're experiencing at the moment, some of which at least partly down to Brexit. But I think it's tough to sort of say for sure how much Brexit is impacting. It's more complicated currently to do business, and certainly it's more complicated to move things around, move product around, and plan things. But I think the pandemic's had a huge influence on that. It's not just about the exit from Europe.
Yeah. What about from the brand side recently?
Yeah. Well, limited impact. I mean, I would normally recommend that a brand works with local partners in each country, to be honest with you. I mean, some brands would choose to appoint a distributor for the continent, and in my experience, I think that can be a little limiting, because I'm not sure that one distributor can do a great job across the whole of Europe, right? So, see that with this.
No, we can't. We actually can't.
Oh, there we go.
Warren's absolutely right. There's no distributor that has the strength of footprints in every territory. That just doesn't exist. So that is a challenge. And I think as a distributor we'd like to be there, but we're not, and I certainly don't see any of our competitors there either. So that is another challenge around how that means that you have to divide things up and split things down a little bit.
Again, Rani, sorry.
No, it's just to finish that point. So I would normally advocate a distributor in each country, or at least each strategic country in which you want to start doing business in. And of course, if you've got an entity in Europe that you're selling to, and perhaps they're importing to Europe, has some added complexities now that it didn't before. So I think if you have this strategy of distributors both in Europe and in the UK, then Brexit doesn't play too much in part as far as brand is concerned.
Yeah.
There are some considerations with compliance and certifications which are coming in the next 12 months, so I think that is a relatively minor consideration that needs consideration.
Yeah, sure.
consideration twice there.
Yeah, so look, this all been great tips for brands coming into Europe. With CES coming up, I'm sure lots of brands will be thinking about re-entering back into the European market. But if you were going to think about, one or two tips that you would pass on through this podcast or to people that you're meeting at CES for brands entering Europe, what would they be? So, Warren, your key.
My tips would be work with. Try and work with people that have experience and knowledge of the market first. My second tip would be go narrow and deep. If you try and take everything on, you're probably going to fail. So work with a small number of the right partners in the right countries. And my third tip would be have a robust marketing strategy for each of those strategic countries and be prepared to make some investments, because it's not about just putting products onto shelves. It's about creating brand awareness, product awareness, seeing those products sell through and achieving repeat business through your consumers and ultimately through your channel as well.
Yeah. And just before Luke gives us a couple of tips, in terms of like trying to find trusted partners, if you've never been to the European market before and done business here, how would you do your due diligence on those partners?
Well, there are agencies out there. I mean, I'd be happy to connect with anyone and give them my advice and feedback and nudge them in the right direction. I think, we probably will end up talking about CES, but IFA's always a good show to come across and get a feel for the market, get an understanding of what distribution looks like and what brands are out there, and network and chat to people as well. So I think there are ways that you could learn, and there are also many people out there that could help you avoid making the inevitable mistakes that most brands end up making.
Yeah, sure. And I've seen some horror stories where some quite big brands have ended up signing distribution partners, thinking that they take on, they manage Europe or they manage the UK, and they've actually been a guy in a bedroom in Manchester, or they're basically just selling online and they're buying 10 products a go and that kind of thing, which I've found incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've seen that on a number of occasions, and signing exclusive contracts that are very difficult to get out of. And honestly, just some of the founders that I've chatted to, and probably Luke as well, they've put so much into this. They've risked their house to get started, and it's tough. And just one bad decision can see everything unfold before they've even had a chance to make it work. So. There are some really, really big decisions. Talking to people that have made those decisions before and worked out how not to make mistakes, I think that's worth the wait in gold.
Sure. And then Luke, what are your sort of key bits of advice for a brand coming into Europe?
So I think my tips would be, I think the obvious one for me is the overemphasis on sales. Try to be able to see beyond the sales piece and ensure that you've got your structure sorted, because I think we see just this sort of almost desperation point to make the sale, and that's very rarely the most sort of successful route.
Do you think brands do they feel under pressure to make sales?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Keep you interested?
Well, not so much keep us interested. I think it's more just the structure from there. They might have investors, and they need to, they're under pressure to find a return on investment sooner rather than later. They're applying for extra rounds of funding. Seeing the sales come through is clearly important for as a metric. But don't try and overstock. Don't try and put too much on the shelf. Try and sell products. Honestly and effectively, and in the right levels of quantities, because that has to be kind of the long-term play. And I think I would also say you've got to either hire people who don't have the expertise that you do. If you're the engineer, you don't know how to sell, you need the sales guy. You need someone who's going to manage the marketing, and you need somebody who can plan logistics and understand how to move products. And if you don't hire them into your own business, then get a distributor or an agency or whatever it is that you need to get that expertise. Don't be shy of doing that, and don't think that you can just learn all that stuff. You need experience, people with experience. to give you the better chance of success.
Yeah. And if I'm a brand, I mean, I know from personal experience, we obviously introduce brands to CMS all the time that approaching us or just cool brands we've had a long hard sort of journey. But I know you're busy and you get approached all the time by brands. What is it that attracts your attention when a brand comes to you? What is it that will make you pick up the phone and say, "Yeah, I wouldn't mind speaking to you"? See.
Well, I think if it's a game-changing product, if it's disruptive, so if it's not me too, if it's something unique about it, and I'm responsible for bringing new brands and products, technology into CMS as part of my role, but it's not just me who makes that decision. So we'll take loads of brands, put them in front of multiple people within the business, and indeed in front of customers as well, to get feedback before we get close to making a signing on a vendor. So we'll talk to Warren and his team in Unlock. We have loads of ideas and products and brands coming through, and we'll look to take 1 out of 10 probably, because we'll filter it all down.
How many game changers do you see? I mean, how many products are game changers these days?
Not many. And that's part of the reason why the success rate is so low. There's a lot of brands producing headphones, for example, and there are thousands of headphones. So it's kind of tough to break the mold there, or sort of you take headphones to a buyer at Dixon's, then it's quite difficult to get them excited. That has to be something that's really different, to get them excited and get them interested. And as you say, there's not many of those. So that we have quite a ruthless filtering process as a result of that. Where we show products around to people, we quickly make a decision of whether we'd like to move to the next stage or not. And doing that efficiently, quickly, is important.
Yeah, I mean, from the comms point of view, we obviously have a similar situation to you, where we have lots of different brands that we could work for. But the brands that we try and build or work with, they're ones that can kind of create that differentiation maybe from a branding point of view. So their branding's nice, their customer service, the way they sort of engage with their end users, it can really set apart a brand and sometimes make the difference. I mean, there's all sorts of brands outside of consumer electronics, like we've had of Huel, the food brand. Again, I've just found out recently that it's a brand from Aylesbury, where I'm actually originally from.
Is it?
It's actually from, and I found out in my Boxer Club, I wasn't allowed to mention Boxer, but I'm going to mention it.
Did you box?
I do box. But anyway, the brand Huel is a guy from Aylesbury, but you would think it's some international brand, but actually what stands at their heart is just this kind of attention to branding and detail. And for example, when you order some of their product, you get their drinks bottle and it's all lovely branded, so you end up walking around with it. It's just kind of little attentions to detail that can make a real difference from any other sort of, like in that case, food supplement, brand. So,
well, I think the other thing for me is that lots of brands that I speak to think they're ready to launch. But when you do due diligence, and this is also part of the process that Luke was talking about, there's a lot of questions to ask. It starts with the product, it always does, but then it's the packaging and the compliance, and are they aware that we're a different, to Luke's earlier point, continent to the US? We've got different laws. We can't insist on the price that a product's sold at. It has to, European free trade exists, and there's just and the marketing strategies of brand prepared to invest in awareness campaigns and driving product out to consumers rather than just sitting on the shelf. So I think in asking these questions, if it's not a game-changing piece of innovation, but it has everything in place and ready to go, and you can build a good story around it, and you can go and tell that story to the buyers, then it's got a great chance of success. But even then, I would say be patient, because it takes time and it's hard work, and you have to work with it for a while.
I think there are other points around, so the game-changing part is clearly important. As Warren says, if they've got everything kind of lined up with the branding, and it might be the same similar product as something else, that can definitely work. And I think we do see that in certain scenarios. there could be, I'm trying to think of an example, so e-mobility. So it's very difficult to tell like an e-scooter apart from another e-scooter. But some of the marketing and the kind of the social media adoption that some of these brands are taking on, we've taken on a brand because they've done that well, and I guess similar to your Huel point, they've kind of got the packaging right, they've got the sort of the stylising correct, the comms is all in line and and directed at the right audience, and so sometimes it's difficult to understand at the beginning whether that is in place. I think sometimes you do get a feel that you've got companies who are they've got that level of sort of understanding of how selling works and in the new world.
Yeah, totally. But more than ever, like I say, in the new world, in the last couple of years, everything's gone online. So there haven't been these retailer touch points where people can come and experience the brand and look at it. It's all online. So it's how people are kind of creating content that engages the consumer, and then when they receive the product as well, it's something that they kind of they want to kind of engage with. It's something they want to repeat buy, depending on what it is. So look, I want to.
The last point just there is it a growing category or not? Because I'm sure Luke gets hit with tons of emails around power banks and cases, and we've all had that for years, right? But there are certain categories that are tough because they're very well established with lots of big brands that play in the space. There are others that are in a growth phase with far less competition, where there's room for a bit more innovation. And I think they're the areas that would interest me.
How, just this is an interesting question, but how honest are you with some brands when they approach you? I mean, we've been in a situation where, let's say we're approached by, a headphone brand, for example. We have headphone brands that we look after who are market leaders, and we get approached by new ones, and they come in with the game-changing design, the game-changing strategy, and we're all just sat there looking and thinking, 3 months, you'll be gone. And how honest are you with some of these brands?
For us, we're very honest because
I know you're honest.
Because
What are you suggesting?
I mean, for us, the big difference is that we have to invest in stock. So in order for us to take a brand on, we have to put upfront money and investment in terms of buying stock for us to sell. So if we get a pitch like that we're not sort of happy with, or we just we don't understand it, or we just don't think it stands much chance of being successful, it's quite easy for us. We'll just say that it's not right for us. We actually might recommend a smaller distributor, or we might recommend a distributor where we think there's more of an opportunity in a certain territory or something like that. But we are very direct, and I know personally I'm very direct anyway. But as a business, I think we have to be. We can't afford, distribution is a low margin business, so we can't afford brands where we've purchased stock, it's sat aging, not selling. It doesn't work for us. So
I was laughing because obviously I have introduced a couple of brands to you over the years, and I was quite excited about that brand. Obviously at the time, it's more revenue for us and stuff like that. But then you've thrown it back and said, this is rubbish. And then you actually realise, it's rubbish. And the thing is, unless it's like from a comms point of view or from your point of view, you invest a lot in a brand to kind of get it going in terms of manpower, kind of mind share, all that kind of stuff that goes with it. But actually, if it is just a me too, or it's just something that's not going to work, or you're just wasting your time, because what we actually want is long-term brands that grow within the business. So
they're short-term engagements. I think being completely honest in a respectful way, because clearly some of these founders have put a lot of time and effort into it, and no one likes being told that their baby's ugly. But if you can give them good strategic advice and you can back it up with justification through experience, then I would like to think that most would listen to that.
It is a hard one though, because telling someone that their life's work is pointless.
Yeah, I mean, usually they'll have a number of things in place, and there will be some gaps, and if you can kind of coach them on the gaps, and if they're receptive to listening and working in those areas, then they've got a chance. It's the challenge is those that don't listen.
I think you often can direct somebody in maybe a different direction, and not it's not. We've had some examples where people have come to us with certain products wanting to put it into retail. I think we saw like a sort of smart speaker product which was out, but actually it was perfect for the hotel business, and they went on to do like some successful business in that area. So often, it's not just about saying no, it's about saying, well, it's not right for us, these are the reasons, we'd advise you to do this, change the packaging, probably make it more targeted, or maybe change your channel in terms of where you're aiming to pitch the product. So we will be constructive, and I think it is important to do that, and work with all of those vendors in a fair way.
Yeah, I think we try and keep these podcasts within sort of 20 minutes, half an hour. So thank you both today for your sort of sound advice. I think many brands will find that useful, especially with CES coming up, and then maybe starting to think about coming back to Europe. Now that we're sort of starting to get a bit back to more normality. So yeah, thanks for your time. And if anybody out there is interested in Europe from a sales point of view or distribution point of view or comps, then get in touch.